For many Americans across basically every type of job, burnout was one of the things you had waiting for you. If you were lucky enough to continue to have a job during the pandemic, it was pretty much ubiquitous. And there were some career fields that, sort of by the very nature of people staying at home might have taken off a bit, some forms of media and content creation. But those people too found that the pandemic was tough times, that the trends that we were already seeing before we entered into 2020 were only exacerbated by it. Joining us now to break this down after producing some amazing research on this, we have a technology reporter for the New York Times, Taylor Lorenz. Welcome to the Damage Report.
Thanks for having me.
Very glad to have you here. So I read your piece in the New York Times about young creators on things like TikTok and Instagram. What made you want to look into burnout in these fields?
Yeah, well, I think that, throughout the pandemic, as so many people got laid off, a lot more people turned to the content creator industry. You saw a lot of people that formerly had retail jobs, trying to make it as social media influencers. People started streaming and all of that. So there was really this boom in creators. It's the fastest growing segment of small business in America. And I wanted to look at sort of how that was affecting the actual people, that are working, streaming sometimes 16 hours a day with no time off and no labor protections or anything like that. So decided to just call some of them up, and it was sort of uniformly, they all said the same thing, which is that they were experiencing a mental health crisis.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that, especially for Twitch, which seems to incentivize people doing extremely long streams. That does seem difficult. So I'm curious, the people you talk to, I'm sure some of them probably got their start over the last year, but for those who might have been around for longer, was this a thing where 2020 was especially bad, or has this been a problem for a long time?
This has been a problem for a long time. I mean, I think people in this industry have kind of normalized it. They're just like, well, unfortunately, that's how it is, And there was one kid that I spoke to that talked about sort of feeling like he could become irrelevant any day just by some big tech company changing an algorithm. These tech companies want to sell this version of creators as entrepreneurs, right? They try to say, hey, you're starting your own business, right? But you're building it all on the back of these tech platforms that ultimately hold the cards. And so it can just be a really precarious profession. And it's why a lot of people don't do it for years. So many people only last a couple years. They don't make a long-term career out of it.
Yeah, and I have to assume that it's become easier for people to get on a lot of these platforms. That's probably leading to saturation. Is that part of the fear about the possible irrelevancy, that there's always going to be somebody else who's working super hard that might try to, take your audience or whatever?
Yeah, there's always someone behind you. There's millions of people behind you. I mean, you're essentially competing against every single other person on the internet. A lot of people have asked, why don't these creators try to unionize or whatever? And a lot of these groups have tried to sort of collectively negotiate with these tech companies for protections or money or things like that. And it's always been pretty unsuccessful because these tech companies know that even if this current wave of people is gone, there's so many waves behind them that will work for less money and sort of not ask for the same types of things.
Exactly. In your piece, you talked about how the technology industry has been one of the chief beneficiaries of, as you just pointed out, that there's always going to be these creators making content for them. They can basically create the platform, and then the creators will go there. So how is the tech industry benefiting? Is it financial?
Oh yeah, I mean, the tech industry just continues to rake in money from all of these people. They like I was saying, they sort of try to say, oh, well, you're getting this independence, you're building your business on here, but they're taking, they're using the content that you create that belongs to them. They are monetizing basically the engagement that these content creators are generating, and ultimately these content creators are putting money in Mark Zuckerberg's pocket, right? Or the head of TikTok's pocket, because the people that own the tech companies are the ones that are really cashing in. And they're benefiting not just monetarily, but they're getting, their platforms are getting more clout and more influence, and they then, can lobby harder for whatever they want in our government. It really just adds to their social, political, and economic capital.
I know that over the past few years, it's become pretty typical for businesses to at least try to put across the idea that they care more about the mental health of their employees, focusing on things like wellness and stuff like that. Have we seen that at all on some of these platforms? Any sort of concern for the long-term welfare of their creators?
Yeah, I think on an individual platform basis, like, when a ton of top YouTube creators began burning out in 2018, the platform made a bunch of kind of statements. One of their product managers started to speak out. They said they'd make changes to kind of stymie burnout. TikTok has done sort of similar things. I think TikTok's been a little bit more helpful to creators that have actually reached out for help. But the problem is systemic. It's bigger than any one of these tech companies. It's this entire system where, people feel like they have to turn to the internet to sell themselves or sell their personality online because they have no job security elsewhere, and they feel like that's a more stable position to be in. So it's a symptom of this broader sort of society. Also the fact that this class of workers has no protections, right? Like all these people are independent contractors. They're not like employees of Instagram or any of these companies. And you see this with the gig economy, right, too. Like these are independent contractors. They're not really our employees. They don't work for us. So we don't need to give them benefits or time off or mental health care because ultimately they're just on our platform. They're using our platform.
Is that something that any of them any of the creators that you talked to brought up as a potential solution, or if not that, have they given you any ideas of things that they think would help them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have spoken up in this space. Li Jin, who's a very famous investor, actually pioneered a lot of investment in this space, has actually called for things like a universal creative income, which would basically be like a universal basic income for people working in creative arts. I think that a lot of these creators have wanted more from the company. They would love to take a week off and not feel like they're losing traction in the algorithm, for instance. If there was like a way for them to almost have an out of office, there's no out of office for YouTube or TikTok really. So I think that there's a lot that could be done from a product standpoint and just from a larger sort of societal standpoint to protect these people.
Yeah, well, as you've alluded to, there's a lot going on here, and we've barely even touched on some of the specific interviews that you did. So if anyone's watching this wants to read Taylor's work, it is available at the New York Times, titled "Young Creators Are Burning Out and Breaking Down." There's a lot there. Taylor, thank you. I want to thank you both for the work and for joining us on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.